Hello, once again, welcome back. Let's jump back. Let's jump back into our reading. Observance 4. In 1538, with the death of his mother, Helena, the 8-year-old future Caesar Ivan IV, or Ivan the Terrible, of Russia, became an orphan. For the next 5 years, he watched as the princely class, the boyars, terrorized the country. Now and then. To mark the young Ivan, they would make him wear a crown and a scepter and place him on the throne. When the little boy's feet dangled over the edge of the chair, they would laugh and lift him off it, handing him from man to man in the air, making him feel his helplessness compared to them. When Ivan was 13, he boldly murdered the boy later and ascended to the throne. For the next few decades, he struggled to subdue the boyar's power, but they continued to defy him. By 1575, his efforts to transform Russia and defeat its enemy had exhausted him. Meanwhile, his subjects were complaining bitterly about his endless wars, his secret police, the the unvanquished and oppressive boyars, his own ministers, began to question his moves. Finally, he had had enough. In 1564, he had temporarily abandoned the throne, forcing his subjects to call him back to power. Now he took the strategy a step further and abdicated. To take his place, Ivan elevated a general of his, Simon Bekbulatovich, to the throne, but although Simon had recently converted to Christianity, he was by birth a Tartar, and his enthronement was an insult to Ivan's subjects, since Russians looked down on the Tartars as inferiors and infidels. Yet Ivan ordered that all Russians, including the boyars, pledge obedience to their new ruler, and while Simon moved into the Kremlin, Ivan lived in a humble house on Moscow's outskirts, from which he would sometimes visit the palace, bow before the throne, sit among the other boyars, and humbly petition Simon for favors. Over time, it became clear that Simon was a kind of king's double. He dressed like Ivan and acted like Ivan, but he had no real power, since no one would really obey him. The boyars at the court, who were old enough to remember taunting Ivan when he was a boy by placing him on the throne, saw the connection. They had made Ivan feel like a weak pretender, so now he mirrored them by placing a weak pretender of his own on the throne. For 2 long years, Ivan held the mirror of Simon up to the Russian people. The mirror said, "Your whining and disobedience have made me a Caesar with no real power, so I will reflect back to you a Caesar with no real power. You have treated me disrespectfully, so I will do the same to you," making Russia the laughingstock of the world. In 1577, in the name of the Russian people, the chastised boyars once again begged Ivan to return to the throne, which he did. He lived as Caesar until his death in 1584, and the conspiracies, complaining and second-guessing disappeared along with Simon. Interpretation. In 1564, after threatening to abdicate, Ivan had been granted absolute power, but these powers had slowly been chipped away as every sector of society, the boyars, the church, the government, vied for more control. Foreign wars had exhausted the country. Internal bickering had increased, and Ivan's attempt to respond had been met with scorn. Russia had turned into a kind of boisterous classroom in which the pupils laughed openly at the teacher. If he raised his voice or complained, he only met one resistance. He had to teach them a lesson, give them a taste of their own medicine. Simon Bekbulatovich was the mirror he used to do so. After 2 years in which the throne had been an object of ridicule and disgust, the Russian people learned their lesson. They wanted their Caesar back, conceding to him all the dignity and respect that the position should always have commanded. For the rest of his reign, Russia and Ivan got along fine. Understand, people are lacked in their own experiences. When you whine about some insensitivity on their part, they may seem to understand, but inwardly they are untouched and even more resistant. The goal of power is always to lower people's resistance to you. For this, you need tricks, and one trick is to teach them a lesson. Instead of haranguing people verbally, then create a kind of mirror of their behavior. In doing so, you leave them two choices. They can ignore you, or they can start to think about themselves. And even if they ignore you, you will have planted a seed in their unconscious that will eventually take root. When you mirror their behavior incidentally, do not be afraid to add a touch of caricature and exaggeration, as Ivan did by enthroning a tartar. Is the little spice in the soup that will open their eyes and make them see the ridiculous, ridiculousness in their own actions. Observance 5. Dr. Milton H. Erickson, a pioneer in strategic psychotherapy, would often educate his patient powerfully but indirectly by creating a kind of mirror effect, constructing an analogy to make patients see the truth on their own. He would bypass their resistance to change. When Dr. Erickson treated married couple complaining of sexual problems, for instance, he often found that psychotherapists' tradition of direct confrontation and problem ironing only heightened the spouse's resistance and sharpened their differences. Instead, he would draw husband and wife out on their topics, often banal ones, trying to find an analogy for the sexual conflict. In one couple's first session, the pair was discussing their eating habits, especially at dinner. The wife preferred the leisurely approach, a drink before the meal, some appetizers, and then a small main course, all at a slow, civilized pace. The frustrated the husband, he wanted to get dinner over quickly and to dig right into the main course, the bigger the better. As the conversation continued, the couple began to catch glimpses of an analogy to their problem in bed. The moment they made this connection, however, Dr. Erickson would change the subject, carefully avoiding a discussion of the real problem. The couple, although Erickson was just getting to know them and would deal with the problem directly the next time he saw them, but at the end of this first session, Dr. Erickson directed them to arrange a dinner a few nights of it that would combine each person's desire. The wife would get the slow meal, including time spent boarding, and the husband would get the big dishes he wanted to eat. Without realizing they were acting under the doctor's gentle guidance, the couple would walk into a mirror of their own problem, and in their mirror they would solve their problem themselves, ending the evening just as the doctor had hoped, by mirroring the improved dinner dynamics in bed. In dealing with more severe problems, such as the schizophrenic mirror fantasy world of his or her own construction, Dr. Erickson would always try to enter the mirror and work within it. He once treated a hospital inmate who believed he was Jesus Christ, draping sheets around his body, talking in vague parables, and bombarding staff and patients with endless Christian proselytizing. No therapy or drugs seemed to work, until one day Dr. Erickson went up to the young man and said, "I understand you have had experience as a carpenter. Being Christ." The patient had to say that he had had such experience, and Erickson immediately put him to work building bookcases and other useful items, allowing him to wear his Jesus crab. Over the next weeks, as the patient worked on these projects, his mind became less occupied with Jesus' values and more focused on his labor. As the carpentry work took precedence, a psychic shift took effect. The religious fantasies remained but faded comfortably into the background, allowing the man to function in society. Interpretation. Communication depends on metaphors and symbols, which are the basis of language itself. A metaphor is a kind of mirror to the concrete and real, in which it often expresses more clearly and deeply than a literal description does. When you are dealing with the intricable willpower of other people, the direct communication often only heightens their resistance. This happens most clearly when you complain about people's behavior, particularly in sensitive areas such as their lovemaking. You'll affect a far more lasting change if, like Dr. Erickson, you construct an analogy or symbolic mirror of the situation and guide the other through it. As Christ himself understood, talking in parables is often the best way to teach a lesson for your lost people to realize the truth on their own. When dealing with people who are lost in their reflection of fantasy worlds, including a host of people who do not live in mental hospitals, never try to push them into reality by shattering their mirrors. Instead, enter their world and operate inside it, under their rules, gently guiding them out of the hall of mirrors they have entered. Okay, so that's it, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye. Bye.